We're ready. We're ready because we have been focusing on what we can control. And that's building our strength at home.
Sent its strongest warning yet to the United States. After being hit with 2 new rounds of US tariffs in just 1 week, Ottawa is now preparing a powerful response. If Canada strikes back, the economic pain for America could become much worse. Prime Minister Mark Carney was asked what options Canada is prepared to use in response to the newest round of American tariffs. His answer was 4 words: everything is on the table. The tariffs in question are a 10% measure tied to forced labor concerns, a legal mechanism entirely separate from the 50% proclamation signed 3 days earlier. Canada is now absorbing 2 distinct tariff actions from Washington within a single week. The forced labor tariffs Trump announced on July 23rd apply to multiple countries, including Canada, using an authority distinct from Section 232 national security provisions and from the trade discrimination justifications cited in the July 20th proclamations. Forced labor trade measures typically operate through customs enforcement mechanisms that allow goods to be blocked or tariffed based on findings about labor conditions in supply chains. Applying that authority to Canada, a country with labor standards comparable to and in some sectors exceeding American standards, represents an expansion of the legal grounds Washington is using to impose costs on Canadian goods. Carney's response emphasized both the defensive posture and the continued negotiating track. Canada is focused on protecting steel, aluminum, forestry, and manufacturing, the 4 sectors that have absorbed the most concentrated tariff damage since February 2025. Steel faces 50% Section 232 duties. Aluminum faces 50% Section 232 duties. Forestry faces a combined effective rate approaching 35% on softwood lumber, plus the new 50% on wood furniture products. Manufacturing faces the 25% automotive tariff, and now the July 20th measures on furniture, cement, and other goods. Those 4 sectors employ hundreds of thousands of Canadians across every province. The provincial distribution of that damage is uneven, and BNN Bloomberg reported that economists are warning the gaps in tariff effects among provinces could test the unity of Canada's coordinated response. Ontario absorbs the majority of the $28 billion national impact from the July 20th measures because the province is Canada's automotive and manufacturing center. Quebec's aluminum smelters, 9 of Canada's 10 primary facilities, carry the concentrated weight of the 50% aluminum tariff. British Columbia's forestry sector faces the lumber duties. Alberta and Saskatchewan received exemptions on energy, potash, and critical minerals in the July 20th proclamations, leaving those provinces less directly exposed to the newest measures than their eastern counterparts. That asymmetry creates a coordination challenge that economists have flagged as a genuine political risk. A province facing severe tariff damage has a different incentive structure than a province whose primary exports were exempted. Ontario's calculation on how aggressively to retaliate differs from Alberta's calculation. Quebec's aluminum exposure differs from Saskatchewan's potash exemption. The Team Canada framing that both federal and provincial governments have used since early 2025 depends on all provinces accepting shared costs for a shared negotiating position, a proposition that becomes harder to sustain as a tariff burden concentrates in specific regions. The premiers addressed exactly that coordination question at the Council of the Federation meeting in Charlottetown this week. Their collective position emphasized that future measures will be coordinated and focused on defending Canadian workers and industries. Ontario Premier Doug Ford stated the province will not lift its ban on American alcohol products. Other premiers reinforced the alcohol restrictions rather than distancing from them. That unified provincial position on at least one specific measure demonstrates the coordination holding despite the uneven damage distribution. Ford's characterization of Canada's leverage at the same meeting identified where the response could escalate if negotiations fail. We are an energy powerhouse, and we could dismantle the US if we wanted to, if we all work together, Ford said, naming electricity, potash, and oil specifically, while noting he was not speaking for other provinces. That statement describes precisely the coordination requirement economists have flagged. Ontario controls electricity, Saskatchewan controls potash, Alberta controls oil, and any coordinated energy response requires 3 provincial governments plus Ottawa to agree simultaneously. Carney's own approach has consistently prioritized the negotiating track while keeping response options undefined. Following the July 20th proclamations, he spoke directly with Trump, and both leaders agreed to intensify trade discussions within the 30-day implementation window. His formal statement described the tariffs as the latest in a series of unilateral U.S. trade actions that began with the U.S. imposing a series of tariffs in direct violation of the Canada-United States-Mexico agreement. That legal framing establishes Canada's position for any dispute settlement proceeding, treating the entire sequence since February 2025 as one continuous violation rather than as separate policy decisions. The legal environment for these tariffs has shifted in ways that affect their durability. The U.S. Supreme Court struck down the IEEPA Emergency Tariff Authority earlier in 2026, forcing the administration to identify alternative statutory mechanisms for measures it could no longer ground in emergency powers. The July 20th proclamations used different legal instruments. The July 23rd forced labor tariffs use another authority entirely. A tariff regime built across multiple contested legal foundations carries litigation exposure that a single, unambiguous authority would not, and Canada has already challenged the Section 232 steel and aluminum measures at the WTO and under CUSMA dispute settlement. Canada's negotiating position includes commitments its own legislation prevents it from trading away. Bill C-202, passed by Parliament in 2025, legally prohibits Canadian trade negotiators from offering additional concessions on supply-managed sectors, including dairy, poultry, and eggs. That statutory constraint removes one of Washington's stated priorities from the table entirely, regardless of what pressure the tariffs create. Provincial alcohol restrictions sit within provincial jurisdiction that the federal government cannot unilaterally override. Counter tariffs on American steel and aluminum remain in force. The 30-day window on the July 20th tariffs runs to approximately August 19th. The forced labor tariffs announced July 23rd operate on their own separate timeline. Carney has committed to intensify negotiations across both. Canadian officials continue to state they prefer a negotiated outcome. And the phrase Carney used when asked what Canada is prepared to do if those negotiations fail remains the clearest public statement of the government's position. Everything is on the table.